Hello, goblins. Welcome to Goblin Salvage Rights. My name is Robert.
And I'm Erik.
And today's topic is a spicy one. Milestone leveling versus experience point leveling. Who will win? Who will reign supreme?
Milestone, of course.
No, my friend. The game is balanced around experience points.
But Milestone gives me control. Experience leaves me having to keep track of things, and I drop them.
Ding, ding, ding. That's the bell. All right. So before we jump into the topic, as always, we need to talk about the games we played.
The games we play, because that's why we're doing this in the first place, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So tell me about Edgewatch.
Edgewatch. Well, I ran an Edgewatch game, and it was a weird one for me. I tried a lot of experimental stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I was most proud of was a collaborative NPC building project that we all did. I had a good time with it. So what I did was I started the game with a sort of in the middle of the action, I was playing as a weirdly voiced NPC yelling up at the castle gates. And I was having a conversation with one of the players. It got weird enough to where the player looked me dead in the eye and said, "Okay, what am I looking at? Who is this guy who's down there talking all weird?" I said, "I'm glad you asked."
Yeah.
So I broke you guys up into two groups, one of three, one of two, and I handed a booster box of Pathfinder miniatures, unopened, completely random on the inside. It was the City of Lost Omens series of minis. There's like 44 to the whole thing, and there's a random 4 in each box. So I handed...
it was specifically the Mwangi Expanse series.
Oh, well, it was Mwangi. Okay,
Yeah,
I thought I did the other one. Okay.
No worries.
That was a missed opportunity, but I probably got those on discount. That's why I used little red stickers on the bottom. Buy those. But yeah, I had you and one of the other players go into the living room, and the other 3 kept them in the kitchen. And the idea was you guys pick the mini you think is just cool. Do your research, go onto all the monster sites, do the background, look at the stats, weaknesses, and all that crap, and just kind of like pitch me who you want to see as this NPC. And then, the 2 different groups got a chance to say, hey, this is who we picked. This is the backstory, the name, quirky little things about this NPC. And, Almighty GM, this is why you should choose our creature, our miniature, to be our new NPC. And then whoever wasn't doing the pitch got to ask questions. And we kind of waited till everybody said their piece, traded the mic, and I got to hear both pitches. And then I went into the room, did my own little bit of research, and I found the appropriate one to use for that scene and for the rest of that book. And now I have 2 NPCs I can pull out that I didn't have to world build myself.
Absolutely.
And it was I hope you guys had fun, because it was just a fun moment of inspiration for me that totally panned out.
It was a blast. It was a blast. I absolutely loved it. I should
have brought them. I don't know why.
Yeah, just deciding which one to pick was kind of tough for us, because it was either one of the spider people in spider form, so it was like this adorable little fuzzy
tarantula
spider
with like a silk scarf,
or like a Quetzalcoatl or whatever, like the
like a godling type character.
Yeah, the serpentine god character. And Nick and I were looking at each other like,
can't get away with that, right?
I don't know. But I think we picked the right choice at the end of the day. And then you chose the creepy anteater that eats bodies or whatever.
Well, you guys play to your judge.
It's
That's
like an awakened anteater that eats corpses.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a scavenger. And
crazy.
The pitch was great, because this is
awesome,
cops and robbers, gang warfare, disposing of bodies, and then this NPC showed up.
Yeah.
I would have been dumb not to pick it.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of fun. And the reason why I wanted to bring that story up is I basically let you guys run the first 45 minutes of that session through that exercise. And I got to chill and just watch you guys create the world.
And another thing is you're going to be using the leadership subsystem, right?
That was the other thing. Yeah, I probably should have led with that. The NPC is going to be folded into the leadership subsystem. So when we look at the little chart on how high a level we are as a party and how many lieutenants we have, how many members of our team we have, it's just numbers on a graph, and there's no spirit to it. But I wanted a personality, and you guys just crafted that from nothing.
So you've decided to do like the party as experience point, like the party gets the leadership and not individual players. Because remember on our leadership episode, which you guys should check out, probably one of my favorite episodes. We talked about how you could apply this to individual characters, and each individual character could have their own little table, or you apply it to the group.
I think I'm starting small and more manageable. So I'm going to start with everybody under one leadership. And then as your guys' individual player stories sort of go further down the road, and you start grabbing more and more NPCs into your individual orbits, because this person is going down a bad road and this person has to keep a certain appearance up, you'll have certain people that are just drawn to your stories over the next 2, 3, 4 books. And then I might break apart the leadership system and be, more discreet one-on-one. But for now, this little NPC, this carrion eater, is going to be the body disposal service for the
awesome.
For Edgewatch. So that was a grand old time. Did we do a Kingmaker thing at all this past week? Yeah,
we did. I think we've actually had 2 games since we shot our last episode.
Okay.
The players have basically, I've done a 1 random encounter per night. Now, the games we play with Edgewatch, we get far more done in our Edgewatch games than we do in our Wednesday night games, just because the group dynamics is totally different. It's a lot more laid back, less serious, more fun kind of like play style, I want to say. Maybe not more fun. That's kind of like a obtuse way to say it. But and we have less time too. We really only play for like 2 or 3 hours every night.
Yeah, playing after work and before bedtime, that's a crunch.
Because we all leave at 9 normally. 9:30.
Yeah, that's my fault.
Yeah. So we've basically stumbled over a couple of random encounters. The party learned that they shouldn't split the party the first time when they got attacked by a bunch of random
It's funny
wolves.
how often we have to learn that same lesson.
And then in the next hex, they got attacked by a bunch of spooky man-eating tarantulas.
Right, because we're doing hex crawl, so every hex has its own little, monster biome thing going on in it.
I roll randomly for random encounters.
Okay.
And the way I do it is each hex, actually, this is the hex thing. Each hex has the possibility of a random encounter based on its biome. And every time you travel through it, you have the opportunity to fight the random monster in there. Once you've defeated it, that random monster encounter can't be had again, basically. If I wanted to, I could have like another random encounter happen after something major happens. Like there's a big shift in the story a couple chapters in, and some people come into the land that are, like not from around here. So then I could reintroduce random encounters again, flavored towards that new threat, or maybe the after effects of what that new threat is. What you're experiencing in that new threat.
Yeah, I like that last bit.
Yeah, like, let's say like some giants move in and they push out a bunch of other people, and then those people get pushed onto you in random encounters, and you learn about the giants through those people getting, destabilized or whatever. So yeah, that's kind of how I'm handling random encounters. It's also a really good way to just like feed you guys experience points, which is nice. Speaking of which, topical.
Yummy.
And the party's so young that I think having these little random encounters not only is a good piece of world building because it tells you a lot about the biome, but it lets the party kind of figure out how they're going to operate with each other.
Sure.
In like a very basic way. 2 spiders attacking you. They felt pretty threatening. I think they felt.
Yeah, especially when I misheard the bit about the 8 eyes, and I thought it was 8 spiders. Yeah. And I was like, fuck this, I'm out.
Yeah, I described 8 beady eyes gleaming at you across a fire.
Never came through.
And Erik, Erik's hearing disabled. So he'll hear things like 8 eyes and not the rest of the sentence. And he'll be like, oh, fuck, we're fucked. Like, no, 8 eyes on one body.
I didn't even I was the fighter with no armor.
Yeah.
Oh, that was, it was definitely like a numerical panic moment for me.
Absolutely. It's hilarious too, because Gabby's character is literally the first one on watch. And that's who, so like an hour after she starts her watch, you guys get attacked by spiders.
Yep.
It's awesome.
One job. You had one job.
Had one job, Gabby.
I love it.
But yeah, now they're going to be fighting the next. We basically did a setup for our next game, and then the next game is going to basically start, I think, with a combat or like an interaction with the bandits. That'll probably lead to a combat, knowing you guys. Bunch of murder hobos.
Well, I just kind of go with the flow.
When in Rome, don't be Spanish.
Don't be Spanish.
So yeah, that was my game. That was your game.
Yep.
Let's jump into the topic because I think
what is the
doesn't
topic?
really need
Milestone versus XP leveling.
Yeah.
And why Milestone is superior.
So let's talk about how we kind of covered this because I
Sure.
think so. Basically, what I did was I very simply wrote a cost benefit analysis of experience points and of milestone leveling. So I wrote a good and a bad, and like that covers the costs and the benefits of each. So, and I'm not really, honestly, I'm not in one camp or the other. I think it's appropriate for different kinds of games, and I think that's what's most important.
Sure.
Yeah.
I did something similar, pros and cons. I tried to approach milestone leveling, the pros as I feel them as a player and as a GM, because it's a different list. And I tried to pick 3 for each, and it just didn't work out for some categories, and we'll talk about why.
Okay.
And for XP, how do I feel about being a player in an XP driven game versus a milestone driven game?
Right.
And there are certain things I get and things that hurt a little bit when I'm a player.
Yeah.
That's different when I'm a GM.
Gotcha.
So yeah, it's basically that. How do I feel as a player? How do I feel as a GM? You've probably seen that as a theme of most of my lists because I think it's completely relevant. Most GMs start as players, and it's a way to get a little bit of empathy building before you take over a table and make people bow before your narrative.
Absolutely. So we'll just start off with I think it's important to establish that Pathfinder's encounter system, the way you balance encounters in the game, is predicated on experience points.
Absolutely.
So just to catch everyone up, if you're new to the system, the way leveling works is you accrue experience points by not only fighting monsters, but by interacting with NPCs, finishing goals like quests, basically, interacting with hazards, basically accomplishing something. Now, in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, to level up, you need 1,000 experience points. And then when you get to the next level, your XP resets, and then you need to get just 1,000 experience points. That seems kind of odd at face value, but it actually makes a lot of sense because the way you balance an encounter, let's say like a fight, is you determine an XP budget. And that XP budget might be 100 experience points for a moderate encounter, or 130 or 40 for a severe encounter, or 160 or 170 for an extreme encounter. And the amount of XP that a certain monster is worth in this budget is relative to the level of the monster and the level of the level of the party. So I wish I was
the number of people in the party as well.
And the number of people in the party. So there's a couple different levers. The reason I don't know this all offhand, even though I've built a bunch of encounters now, is because Mimic Fight Club does such a good fucking
fully automates the process
completely, and I don't have to. I just want to be like, yep, I want it to be hard. These are the kinds
that
of things.
informs a lot of the things I want to talk about.
Yeah. These are the kind of monsters I want. I just scroll through the list, and I'm like, that one's cool. I add one. Oh no, it's severe. It's not moderate.
And these ranges you're talking about,
down a little.
like the moderate to severe, extreme, and all that. It's not a one tick to get to each. It's a range. So if you have between 100 and 130, having 101 point for your budget is very different from having 129 points for your budget.
Yes.
So when we talk about monsters that are exactly as they appear in the bestiary, or they can be weakened versions of it, or they can be advanced versions of it. Elite is what it's called. Yeah. It definitely modifies the look, feel, and severity of the encounter.
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
It's not a severe encounter.
They do a really good job of designing. So one of the cool things about monsters in Pathfinder 2nd Edition is that they almost all have special attacks. They'll have special cool abilities they can use that aren't on a character sheet somewhere.
Sure.
It makes me want to, I know this is a complete sidetrack, but I have an idea. Final Fantasy is a huge game I play.
You don't say.
I used to, huge fan of Final Fantasy. And in Final Fantasy, we have a thing called a blue mage, where basically you tame monsters and you use their monster abilities. I thought it'd be cool. Like a cool idea for a class would be to, obviously summoning is an option in Pathfinder, but it'd be cool to have a class where you like capture the essence of monsters and you're able to literally use the special abilities they have on their
Sure.
sheet
Yeah.
for yourself.
Mhm.
That would be impossibly hard to balance,
Mhm.
but impossibly cool to play.
Sure.
So it's just an idea that literally just popped into my mind. But getting back onto topic. So basically, as you build these encounter budgets, they effectively expect each party to have 8 to 10 encounters between levels. Now that's if you did nothing else except fought stuff. However, what it ends up being like is more around the lines of 6 encounters per level, because all that other that'll get you about 600 to 700 experience points. And then you'll get the other 200 or 300 experience points, or 400, from completing quests, which is or asks
Objectives of some
objectives, interacting with hazards, which are basically like one-off encounters where a thing happens to you, you roll a dice and make decisions, and whether or not you succeed is whether or not you get the full experience or less experience or whatever. And those hazards just have levels attributed to them, and that allows you to very easily
Easy peasy.
create an experience budget for it. So my first pro for experience is that the game is literally predicated on it. And frankly, there has never been a system of high fantasy role-playing games. Frankly, I've never personally played in a role-playing game with a better experience point system. Like, this is as good as it gets currently, in my opinion. It scales. It's basically like an indexed experience point system. And I think that's brilliant.
Okay.
And it really does work. So long as you're giving out experience points for non-encounters on a regular basis, I think it works really well. In Kingmaker, they literally have little quests. They leave these little boxes. They have experience points on them. They're normally like 30 to 60 to 100 experience points for finishing a task. And what I've done in my Kingmaker game is I've literally just told you guys what the quests are.
Right.
Like, this is the quest. Do it and you'll
Choose
get
your own
experience.
adventure style.
Yeah. And it sounds gamey, but at the end of the day, like, it's better to be, in my opinion, it's better to be upfront with your players about what are the expectations are to if you're going to use this gaming mechanic, the expectations should be clearly defined.
Sure.
And it also allows you to get it makes a really easy way for you to track what's going on. You know, maybe we miss a week or two. We come back and we're like, oh, what were we doing again? What was and everyone goes through the recap posts. And then I'm like, hey guys, go check the quests channel in our Discord.
Sure.
Oh, right. We have to go save the queen's daughter or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So as a player, I like XP progression as a player. I really wanted to riff off something you just said. Now I want to go 3 other areas. So when I have XP progression as a player, I feel like I'm watching, the buffering on my computer or a video game being downloaded onto my system, and I can watch the percentage go from 0 to 99. And there's something exciting about knowing where you are in that progression. And you always know where you are in the progression because the information is right there. With Milestone, you never know when you're going to get your next level. And that can be unnerving to certain player types. For me, I like to know how long a story is. And with XP leveling, I know how long the story is before we hit that next threshold and start gaining new abilities. And part of my brain can be like, okay, about 5 more weeks until I get another level. But with, Milestone, it's not like that, which means you have to have a good narrative. Otherwise, I'm just going to be anxious the whole time, not knowing if what I'm doing is important and it's not. And that's one of the pros for XP level progression from the player angle.
It's funny you mentioned that because in Abomination Vaults, one of the games I'm playing in right now, our group is so painfully slow going through the game. Like, there are days we walk away from like a session with like 60 experience points. Because we did one encounter that was like a level, like an easy encounter. And
Did you guys try to like min-max the encounter?
No, we're just like, the group just gets fucking sidetracked all the time.
Like, what kind of sidetrack?
Oh, like they'll get fixated on some minor fun story moment. It's a fun story moment. And and it's a fun interaction with an NPC.
Okay.
But it eats up like an hour or two, and we're only playing for 4 hours. So then we go do a fight, and the fight's like 60 to 100 XP maybe, and then that's it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's just it comes.
Sounds like my kind of game.
It comes in fits and spurts, basically. Yeah. But it's like if we only get together every 2 weeks, we're going to be a level 3 for a long fucking time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the other things I like about XP progression from the player side of the table is I'm more tied to the setting than I am to the characters I encounter. Because with XP, if I'm looking at a map and there's a shorefront and there's a cave and there's a deep dark forest, there's going to be different XP encounters in all of those, and I'm going to want to hit them all because I grew up on Final Fantasy. And you just sort of grind your way through your levels. As a player, I have a grinding mentality when it comes to XP progression that is completely the opposite of my player mentality when I'm doing the other progression, Milestone. So with Milestone, I can kind of take my time and I can get my mind movie on, and I can get absorbed in the details and the minutia of the setting and the people and the plots and the interactions and well, what about this? Well, what if this? Did they really mean that? Or are they possibly hiding this other thing? With hex crawls and random encounters, what you see is what you get. And it's almost 2-dimensional. And when I'm sort of in that Final Fantasy tactics mode, I appreciate that. But when I'm in Final Fantasy 7 or 8 or 9 mode, I want the cutscenes. So I tend to think of Milestone leveling as the cutscene side of my brain, and hex crawls as the XP progression side of my brain.
I think it's important.
Different needs.
Yeah, and I think it's important for DMs to realize that when you have cutscenes and things happen in cutscenes, like give your players XP for that shit.
Sure.
Like, if they talked their way through an issue, if there was a problem and a resolution, especially if the players had to roll dice to get there, if they had to use a skill check or a special ability, that's probably going to be worth XP. Even if it's like,
and this is where I get to the
20.
GM side of the table. I don't want to track that shit because all the time I spend tracking XP to make sure that people are hitting levels at certain points to match certain story beats. That's a weird bit of juggling where I could have spent that energy crafting a new NPC or crafting a new encounter or making a combat flashier than it would have been, because now all of a sudden I got to wing it because I spent all this time tracking XP and trying to get the math right. That's my brain just kind of recoils at the GM side of XP level progression.
My first con is literally can feel tedious or gamey.
Yeah.
I mean, and it can. I think like 40% of that feeling is probably just anxiety, like general GM anxiety. I think it's more often than not the case that you want your players to be over-leveled for content rather than under-leveled for it, especially in a heroic fantasy, right? In your Edgewatch games that you're trying to run as a noir, like, and this kind of gets into where theme and context of the feel of the game really get to begin to influence whether you pick experience or milestone leveling. It would be bizarre to run a noir style game like your Edgewatch with experience points.
Yeah, I can totally envision how it would work, and it would not be the game you're playing in right now. It would feel mechanical. It would feel wooden if I tried to run that. The verisimilitude would be gone.
Yeah.
Because I spend so much of our game time trying to get you guys away from your fucking character sheets and get you into the interactions with the NPCs and the plots and the stories and the repercussions. Every action has an equal and opposite and sometimes greater reaction. And accounting for those things takes up emotional space and brain space and cognitive space, just all of it. So I want the character sheets off the table as much as I can get them. And unfortunately, that also means XP leveling kind of has to go as far as I present a game.
Yeah, this is a really good time to bring up one of my favorite sayings, which is systems matter. Like the game system you play in is the largest influence on whether or not the vibe and the theme of your game is going to get through. Like, say what you want about Pathfinder, say what you want about Blades in the Dark, say what you want about 5th edition and all of the people that are, I guess I think they call it hacking. They have a bunch of like add-ons to it, changing the system to fit their, like at the end of the day, the system and the rules and the mechanics behind the system are what really inform the theme of a game. So if you want to play a gritty noir, you probably shouldn't be playing a gritty noir with the rule set of a heroic fantasy. You shouldn't be playing a heroic fantasy with a Blades in the Dark system, because it's going to feel terrible.
I've got to push back on that. Player buy-in is really the difference between whether it works or it doesn't work, regardless of the system you're using. If you have a player that wants to have utter fidelity to the mechanical rule set above all else, then your theming's fucked. Your story's fucked. If it's about the math first and the story second, it doesn't matter what system you're playing in. If you look at all the players at our table for Edgewatch and all the players at our table for Kingmaker, you can kind of see how they're approaching the experience and the kind of stories they're telling, because so many of the players, a couple of the players are in both games, right? I'm not imagining that. I know it's late, but so I think
nope. Actually, only Jacques.
It's just me and Jacques, right?
Jacques.
Yeah, okay.
You and Jacques.
Which, to be fair, is almost half the table.
No, that's true. That's true. Yeah, it's absolutely true.
But yeah, Kingmaker feels different from Edgewatch, and
for so many reasons.
I guess Jacques is the one example, because you and I are GMing and playing, depending on what group we're in. So I think it's about player and GM buy-in, regardless of the story, because there's an element of restraint. Really, what I'm building up to is restraint. Players need to be able to restrain themselves. Just because you have a mechanic doesn't mean you should use it every chance you get.
I disagree.
I know you do.
Yeah, that's my contention. That's
yeah,
my
because
contention.
mechanics first and foremost, above everything else, is your approach, and it's been that way since I met you. Which is that's where you get your joy in the game, from what I see.
Yeah,
being able to manipulate numbers so you achieve maximal results, and then everything else is sort of in the wake of that.
Well, it's like if I didn't have rules, like I could play a tabletop role playing game without any rules. It would be really easy, actually.
I'd love to see it sometime.
Yeah, because then it would be all Flights of Fancy. It would all be.
It's not though. It's
what do we have in our mind?
Buy-in.
No, yeah, it's shared, but like there's a verisimilitude that we all have to establish at a table, but without rules, without the rules define and kind of begin to sketch out how difficult life is for you. They begin to sketch. They give players an idea of what the theme of the game is. With no rules at all, we all just will collectively agree on what is right or wrong, and then we'll tiptoe. And as we touch the boundaries with our eyes closed of what is appropriate and what's not appropriate, we'll pull back or push forward.
Sure,
that would be fun, and I would actually have a great time doing that. But that's not a role-playing game. That's a role-playing experience.
Amber is a diceless role-playing game, and you just described it to a T. So it's
there
not
are
that it
rules
is
in
or it
Amber.
isn't.
Amber has rules, right?
It does have rules, yeah.
It has mechanics. What I'm describing is literally the four of us sitting in a room and telling a collective story. Okay. That's it, with no rules.
But that's not what I'm describing. This is an apples and oranges conversation.
I don't know. My point is that the mechanics are the seed that grows the theme of a game, and you literally cannot have the same experience with Blades in the Dark as you do with Pathfinder, because the rules are the rules push you in such an opposite direction from each other. Sure. That like a noir setting is just way better in like a Blades in the Dark system than it would be in a Pathfinder system. Not to say that you can't have one in the other, but like they're just better.
You use words like better, and there are qualifiers that go with that.
Yeah,
so
that's fair.
It's you and I are built differently for these kinds of things.
That's
and that's
why
part of why this is so interesting.
Co-hosts.
Yeah,
right. Exactly. But yeah, getting back to the topic at hand.
Overhead. Every GM has overhead. Every player has overhead.
Yeah.
And there are certain kinds of overhead that we appreciate, we like, and it helps us to thrive. And as it bulks and bulks and bulks and gets heavier and heavier and heavier, we either thrive or we crumble under the weight. So as a player, the XP progression isn't. It's a little irritating to keep track of because 65 XP this session, 75 the next session. Wait, I forgot to write it down the third session. Hey, Jacques, what was it the fourth session? And all of a sudden we've got 5 people with 5 different numbers on them and we're all supposed to be the same. It's kind of like...
Hold on that note, are you supposed to be the same?
Absolutely. The core rulebook says yes. So if we're not doing that, then that is a modification.
I didn't realize the core book said that.
It's explicit about it. It says it on several pages.
Oh, fuck.
So I know it didn't used to be that way historically.
Yeah, it was awesome.
But that's the way it is. And if that's the case, what's the point of tracking it?
Well, I mean, like the point of tracking it, like in the original like game I played where experience points were gained, you basically got experience for showing.
In Pathfinder first edition?
Oh, this was 3.5.
Okay, wait.
This was the first game I ever played. Yeah. Like this was the first DM I ever had. Mm-hmm. Tim P. Like way back in the day, you know, you would show up and you'd play the game and your character would experience if you showed up that day. But if you failed to show up that day, you would get less experience. And they would have a trailing block, basically like you would always be at least 2 levels less than, like you could never be less than 2 levels under the average level of the party. Mm-hmm. But like,
did you ever have players in your group that would complain because they had less XP than other people at the table?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
But
that always irritated me.
That's like, but it was kind of cool though, because like to me, at least as a kid, because I was like, well, I showed up more than you did. Mm-hmm. Like I was here for the game more than you. And sure, like life happens. And on average, it pretty much always averaged out where like everyone missed about the same number of games as other people. Mm-hmm. And this was very specifically one of those big table games at a local game store that happened every Sunday, rain or shine. So this isn't like your game that you have with your friends, like every Wednesday night
like
or whatever.
Controlled experience.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It was a lot less controlled. And I think that was almost needed to keep a game like that going for so long.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I didn't realize that was that was a core thing. You guys already have mismatched experience in Kingmaker, actually.
Yeah. And it doesn't drive me crazy. It just makes me wonder what's the point of tracking it if we're all going to be the same level going forward. Because I can just not track it. And then as soon as somebody says, hey, we're leveling up. Okay, I'll level up too.
But you won't be.
Okay, so we're going to be different levels? Is that your plan?
That's not my plan, but it's possible. I mean, you guys split the party. Half of the party had an experience, and the other party didn't have that experience.
Right. Like we already have a situation where not everybody's at the table from week to week. So, if we're going to be doing like some players are 6th level and others are 7th level, you're balancing the encounters.
It's going to be interesting. I know it's probably, it's obviously not canon or whatever, you know, it's not appropriate.
It shouldn't be an issue with our group of personalities, I don't think. So,
not.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be interesting though. I'm just excited. It's kind of me literally just throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. But I think it makes me feel in a game like Kingmaker, in a sandbox like this, it makes me, these are the kinds of things that are nostalgic, that make me feel like classic D&D.
Like the old Isle of Dread hex crawls of yore.
Exactly,
you know,
exactly.
It's the Final Fantasy Tactics example I keep coming back to. It's a specific kind of TTRPG experience that is other to the Milestone experience.
Definitely.
I didn't even grow up with Milestone experience. It was always XP progression until D&D 5th edition. It was the Ravenloft Curse of Strahd that I ran. I think that was my first experience with Milestone leveling. And then I just never looked back after that.
That's crazy that it happened so late.
I know. Yeah. Well, it's because, I've got a few years on you guys. So it was all XP leveling before that. I don't think D&D really did the Milestone thing until 5e, right?
That's a question for all you viewers out there. When was the first time you played Milestone experiencing? I'm curious.
And was it demonstrably different of an experience for you?
Absolutely. Because there's probably a time when culturally Milestone leveling kind of swept through the culture, and I'm not just aware of this cultural movement within.
Yeah, it's a modern design thing. I think.
Yeah, but I'm wondering, like, I'm actually really curious now. Like, at what date did this begin to happen? What are the roots of it? You know what I mean? That'd be an interesting thing.
No, I mean,
give us your theories down in the comments, everyone.
Argue with us. Tell us we're wrong.
Yeah.
Do you, as a player or as a GM, do these things feel differently to you? Like when you use Milestone, have you ever used Milestone leveling?
Yeah, I used to use it almost exclusively.
Do you find you enjoy it more as a player or less as a player than you do as a GM?
So milestone leveling works really well for curated adventure paths generally.
Whether you're playing or running them?
Yeah, because it's just makes it easy. It's just like, oh yeah, the players should be leveled by this time. And from a narrative perspective, it makes sense because they just beat the BBEG. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh yeah, of course you would level right after the BBEG. How appropriate is that? Yeah. There's a nice tidy bow on the end of the game. And it stops players from doing things like, fuck, we have a BBEG fight, but there's not a time clock that's super pertinent. So we're going to go do some side quests real quick to make sure we
grind out some levels.
Yeah. And that's kind of the munchkin-y side of experience that isn't that fun, really. Or it can be verisimilitude breaking.
Oh, yeah. Every single time.
If you decide, yeah, exactly. If you decide to do something that's not hyper pertinent, because you want to be leveled for it.
Right.
Now the players are looking directly at the fourth wall and being like, we need to be better because we live inside of a fantasy. Like
that's XP progression in my experience as a player and as a GM. I feel it every time it's at the table.
There's like a tug.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a compulsory thing.
Interesting.
Because we're no longer talking about story. We're talking about math and we're talking about a system. We're talking about the skeleton, not the flesh and the makeup and the fashion, the clothing. Yeah,
for me, it's always been like I've always resisted the temptation to go on side quests just for experience sake. I'm sure that like I've done it subconsciously in moments, but for the most part, I really like the experience of just reacting in games and letting the experience flow as you will. Because it's not really been like everyone wants to get the next spell, but I'm a big enjoy the journey, not the destination kind of guy. So like, I do my best to enjoy the level and all the challenges that it brings until I get the next one.
Sure.
I guess, but like doing milestone leveling is really fucking convenient.
Yeah.
Like it's just like as a DM, you're just like, you guys are leveled. And I did that to you guys for Kingmaker. I didn't realize it. Because you guys did the Burning Mansion. And then I was like, when you're finished, you're level 2. And I caught myself because I told myself in the beginning of the adventure, we're going to be doing
right
experience points. But then I leveled.
It's hard when you're used to doing things one way. And then you're like, I'm going to do it this other way just to try it out.
And it makes so much sense because you just did this giant penultimate thing. You just set up a bunch of, there's a bunch of enemies and a bunch of conflict that was set up and resolved. And new leads are set up to be paid off later on. Like it's the perfect bow tie moment to level you up.
Yeah.
It feels right narratively.
This Kingmaker thing that we're doing with the skeleton outside the body. Let's get creepy there.
Okay.
I didn't pick any substandard options. I munchkin the shit out of my character. I did not pick an inferior weapon when I had a superior weapon to pick. Same with the feats, same with all of it. That is not a thing I would have done in a million years with milestone leveling, with a story for a story. I've got tons of characters that have substandard spells, skills that don't have maxed values in them, because that's what you're supposed to do in a TTRPG.
Sure.
So that's another thing about the XP progression. If I'm looking at the math of the system and that's where the focus is, then my character is going to be kind of constricted by that design, by that philosophy. But a lot of the creativity kind of goes out the window for me on that because there's only so many options. There's only so many optimal ways to do a class.
That's never been less true in second edition, but that was totally the assumption in first edition.
Everybody goes to Reddit and says, "Hey, what's the best druid I can do?"
Absolutely.
And every time you go to a table
we're
out
trying
there,
to make videos that are just like that.
Yeah. So there's this proclivity to min max when doing something like XP first versus milestone.
And a really good example of that in first edition was Mummy's Mask. So like Mummy's Mask.
Never read that one.
Oh, so Mummy's Mask, from what I've heard on the boards, from what I've read on the Paizo boards, was effectively like
it was a character killer, wasn't it? So you had to be optimized in order to even
because
participate.
everyone was complaining that adventure paths were too easy.
Sure, yeah.
And the
that
thing
was like Gary Gygax's Tomb of Horrors.
That's what it was inspired by. Apparently, I'm not like a historian on Pathfinder lore, but this kind of gets back to the idea that I would wager money that the majority of players are not like the majority of players see XP leveling and making optimal builds and playing the game like Kingmaker. That is like the normal experience, I think, for most players, and most Pathfinder players' experiences. And there's like, to them, they see nothing wrong with it. I'm not saying there is something wrong with it necessarily, but I think I say this like every freaking episode, but like we live in this bubble of narratively focused players, I think. And it's really, and I would love to hear everyone's like comments, like which side of the fence are you on? I'm really genuinely curious. Like how many Pathfinder players out there are mechanics focused like this, that don't mind experience, that don't mind the skeleton. Because when I go on the boards, and I'm on the boards a lot, Paizo boards, I've been on the boards a lot since I was like 11 or whatever, you know what I mean? Like been on the boards for a long time. It's, to me, that's always been the normal accepted thing. And what I did when I was playing with my friends like Ray and stuff like that was like weird. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I found when I was in society games, going all the way back to Living Greyhawk, it tended to be the same items and the same character builds around every table. And I played with dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of different people. And there were maybe like 3 different kinds of fighters, because it was whatever Dragon Magazine said was optimal at the time.
Yeah.
And whatever the most released books. You find the same thing in other things like Warhammer and other games.
Absolutely.
If there's an optimization route and you go into public, that's what you're going to see. It's reflected in there.
In game theory and economics, we call that a dominant strategy.
Okay. Yeah. Which is great if, there's a copper, a silver, and a gold to be won in some sort of competitive atmosphere. Like,
Totally.
You find a lot of that out there in the old organized games. I don't know. XP leveling does have one thing over Milestone. There's an expectation of Easter eggs, I think, that I really appreciate as a player.
What do you mean by Easter eggs?
Well, when you're grinding for levels, when you're looking for excuses to go out and stab at things so you can take their treasure and, get the XP so you can go do the thing you really want to do. All the busy work you do as you're trying to get to that next level bump so you can have the boss fight or get that cool ability, whatever it is. Easter eggs can be found in every biome. There's random encounters can have an Easter egg. I mean, just having these cool little tidbits, whether it's an item, whether it's a piece of story plot or something like that, and you just let it sit and wait for a player to trip over it based on what hex they go to or what biome they travel to or just wherever on the map. You can just sort of like sprinkle them around. When I'm running milestone leveling type games that are story first and mechanics second, I'm too busy with NPCs, with motivations, with relationship maps to have a Holy Avenger +5, buried in a tree stump somewhere in the deep woods for a player to find, because they're going to the deep woods at some point in the next couple of levels, and it's just sitting there waiting. And the different Easter eggs you can put out there, because they're grinding in places that they're just going to go because the map says they have the option to.
Gotcha.
So there's definitely more of a free-form sense of, I'm going to go out and I'm going to explore for exploration's sake, and less of a, guys, we're on the clock. We got 2 weeks to get this thing done, and boy, are we outclassed. We need to start strategizing now, and we need to start talking with our contacts, and we need to start doing things like that. XP leveling feels more like Zelda 1, where you just run around wherever you want to on the map. And sure, people hit harder over on this side of the map, but you get to bomb that wall, and inside you find this extra heart container or an extra sword or an extra something. So that's something, I try to be fair in my list here. As a player, as a GM, whether it's Milestone or XP leveling, there are things that each offers that the other doesn't, depending on what side of the table you're sitting on.
I have a question then. Yeah. Would it kill you if a player asked, hey, are we going to level after this next fight? Like, is this the penultimate thing?
No,
that's not verisimilitude breaking for you.
If they break scene to ask that question,
like mid
yes.
scene,
If they need that answer in order to inform a decision they're trying to decide between their next course of action, yeah, that would bug me. But if it's just like hey, it's been a month and a half since we leveled. I'm just curious. Are we going to level next week after, anytime soon? I think that's a fair question.
Yeah.
But if they're trying to use that information to leverage a piece of story,
if the character in the game is asking that question,
yeah, nothing bugs me more than players that can't keep the player character information separate. And because I like dramatic irony. And you can't have that when you have players who are leveraging one to do the other.
Absolutely. And I think as an American who grew up in movies, dramatic irony is kind of like the fucking bread and butter of good movies.
Would agree.
Of good storytelling in general. But it's in my mind very poignant in the movie. Because probably that's what I think in. I find it very odd that people can't do that, but it also kind of shows their experience as a player in many ways. Like I have this theory of kind of, a lot of players go through the same cycle of growing up as a TTRPG player. You know what I mean? Like,
not yet.
Okay. So like the first time a player does, first time most players get into a TTRPG, they have no prior experience. If they haven't watched a bunch of Critical Role and they know what's couth and what's not couth, they'll just like start breaking shit. They'll be like, oh, I can just do whatever I want in this fantasy land. There's a person telling me what's cool. I killed a shopkeeper. Yeah. Like brand new players, especially young, like adolescents, will do stuff like that because they're just like testing the boundaries of like,
if they're not trying to emulate a character from a movie or a comic, then they're probably breaking something.
Exactly. And that's like, to me, a very normal and typical thing for any human to do given the context of their experience.
Sure.
And I think the inability, I think that what I'm trying to get at is the ability to separate meta knowledge from character knowledge is a skill. It's a talent. It's a muscle that you have to train over years of playing TTRPGs. And I know it kind of makes you, I feel kind of gatekeepy saying that, but I think it's a pretty accurate statement in that, I'm pretty good at it now, but I was fucking shit at it when I was 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 even, like it's hard.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there, and I think it's also it's a choice, and I think it's rooted in our own pride as people who like to think, TTRPG players, we like to think we're smart, and we like to think that we are in control of things. This is my character, these are my abilities, these are my skills, and sometimes I will cheat to keep them safe. And that means using knowledge that my character shouldn't have because I have it as a person.
Absolutely.
And that's that. This conversation is circling around why I draw a distinction between min-maxers and munchkins. Munchkins are the bad guys. Min-maxers are just the people who like to, leverage mechanics to achieve optimal results. Yeah. And that's why one's kind of a slur to me, and the other one's it's not. It's just sort of a neutral thing, a creature out in the wild,
a preference.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. A personality type.
Yeah.
God, I really got to develop language for that. But all of that is to say, I think you're onto something with newer players who have been doing this for a little while, but they're still not exposed to all the different ways of approaching the hobby. And then there are people who've been there, done that for 4 decades.
Wanting to play an evil campaign is another great example.
Yeah.
Like every new player wants to play an evil campaign. And I remember seeing that in Gabby when we played the evil campaign with Jacques. It was like, Gabby was like, I'm an evil anti-paladin.
Right. On parade. Yeah.
And I was like, I loved seeing that because I played an evil anti-paladin in a game when I was like freaking 18. And I did a lot of the same
I was never allowed to do any of that in my gaming growing up. Yeah, no, my groups were always the opposite. Nobody wanted anybody to play evil, and the books were very suggestive of obviously, recommending people just don't do that.
But it was really cool because I was, for the first time in a long time, able to play an evil character, and I had done that thing before, so I wanted to play something a lot more subdued in its evilness. And I think you and I were probably tied for the least evil.
Yeah, evil doesn't have to mean murder.
Characters it doesn't in the game. Like, my character was pure. He was like that. He was pure lawful evil, law-abiding citizen. He's literally like a worshiper of, I think, like Mephiston, the god of money, and like he's like the greed devil, basically. And he very, very clearly like laid down the law for people and asked them to do the right thing and turned the other cheek, asked them multiple times, gave them multiple opportunities to follow the law. And when they didn't, he used harm to melt their face. you know,
I think that is a really good example of where XP leveling is superior to milestone leveling.
Interesting.
Because when you're doing XP leveling, what you're really doing is you're playing Candyman. You're driving an ice cream truck around your neighborhood and you're handing out dopamine hits, one kid at a time. And that's what XP is. Ooh, I got another dopamine hit. Ooh, a few more and I'll get a really big one because I can level up. And in an evil campaign, a GM can sort of like teach people how to be evil without being psychotic stupid.
Oh, you're getting into the psychology of training players to do the kinds of things.
Since we're talking about sort of like gateway players and players who kind of just need that little extra nudge to get a wider breadth of experience. Milestone leveling is a trust exercise. XP leveling is ring the fucking buzzer and I'll feed you. It's conditioning.
A Skinner box.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah. So I think XP leveling has very much and I don't mean this in a pejorative sense, but very much a training wheels component to it, where you reward people in whole for the totality of the thing they're supposed to achieve, or in part because they only partially completed the task, or not at all because they completely failed the task. But with milestone leveling, none of that's relevant. It's just sort of like what makes sense for you to do, and are you being true to your character and the story, and understanding the cause and effect of your actions having repercussions. And it's definitely an elevated mode of play that requires trust around the table. XP leveling is kind of like all you did was fail for the past month and like dumb decisions and
you're still level 3
and still level 3, right? Yeah. So there's math to the cause and effect there.
Absolutely.
And it's I don't know if I would take a table of brand new, just fresh off the truck players and then do a milestone experience. I'd probably start with XP leveling.
Really?
For a lot of the reasons I've already discussed.
Okay.
I'm probably just that guy that's been playing for so long. I don't want to deal with the numbers anymore.
Yeah.
The numbers got boring a long time ago for me. And I want to know about, the secrets of Eberron versus the secrets of Dragonlance versus the secrets of Ravenloft, Planescape, Golarion. And I want to spend my time and overhead, my intellectual overhead in those waters.
I think that to piggyback off that statement you made about how it's a lot harder to run Milestone for players that are brand new or to you, like a new group. I think there's an important caveat there where it's very easy to run Milestone leveling in an adventure path with expected levels and more of a railroady kind of game.
Sure. Simply
because if anything, the Milestone leveling via adventure path is kind of like a medium, a middle ground between those two extremes, if you think about it on a spectrum, because the players metatextually know that like this is the BBEG and this is the end of the chapter.
Once they've seen the patterns a few times.
Exactly. Sure. And we're probably going to be done here and we're probably going to level here and stuff like that. And, you could really upset players when you pull the rug out from underneath them. They kill the BBG and there's no level there.
Where's the sauce, man?
Where's the sauce, man? We're level 5, right, Eric? I mean, this is actually a really good example. You let us level before a BBG fight.
Yeah.
And then you had to re-engineer the fights to make them a little more harder. Right?
Yeah. That's because you guys gave me doe eyes and I have a hard time telling you no when you ask for things. So can we level up? Yes. And then I'll go home and redo the math.
But is that a negative or a positive of milestone leveling?
You guys are at a particular part in your progression where you're getting to the point where the ability to fly versus not fly changes how you interact with the geography.
Absolutely.
So it's an awkward place for you guys to be asking to level early because I'm running out of the AP volume.
Yeah.
And these decisions matter, and that's why they write them that way, and that's why the people who create these adventures, they understand these things. And I'm still like running to catch up in some of these areas.
Yeah, there are certain thresholds where you get access to certain kinds of power that really step you up in a large way.
Yeah, and they'll just completely trivialize certain encounters. And
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know, man. I think there is a tool for every task.
Absolutely.
And there's a time to use XP leveling. There are certain kinds of stories. There are certain kinds of game experiences, table experiences, where that creates the experience that everybody wants because we've all bought into it. If I want a Final Fantasy Tactics experience, I'm never going to do milestone leveling. It's always going to be XP leveling because it's about the skeleton. It's not about the makeup on the flesh.
The makeup on I love this analogy, by the way.
I just like the idea of like a bunch of skeletons walking around and you know what kind of game they're playing.
Yeah, absolutely. Another to piggyback off of that, another great example of using experience leveling is in a hex crawl or something that's more random where there isn't a defined, there's no linearity in the story progression. And it would make more sense for your players to just hodgepodge gain abilities as they kind of feel their way through an environment. I mean, a thread of a story has begun to form in Kingmaker. And I think it's obvious to the players where you're supposed to go first and next. But believe it or not, it's very, very easy to skip an entire chapter of this book. Like just a whole freaking chapter because you don't walk onto the hex.
Will the story be able to continue if we did that?
It will, but the DM is going to have to figure out whatever the ramifications of you not dealing with this dude.
Yeah.
So XP is a really great example of XP. Sandbox is a really good example of when using XP is really easy and beneficial for the GM and for the players in a lot of ways. And as you said, a new party, you may want to just rely on XP for a new group of players because the game was designed to be run that way, and it requires less trust between all the players.
Yeah.
And again, the milestone leveling is really well used in a group of players that you've all been playing for a while and you all really trust a lot of ways, especially in a story perspective. So like if you at home are playing a game with a bunch of players and maybe you just finished a campaign, you should talk about doing a milestone experience in your next game. I think it would really benefit the story that you can tell. It's going to allow you to role play characters. The role playing will change in very subtle and interesting ways when the pressure of experience isn't there.
Yeah.
When there's no gas pedal to press. There's no dopamine drip to eat off of. Suckle on the teat of the dopamine.
Dopamine teats.
Yes.
We're about to gain a rating in this podcast.
Right. It really changes the dynamic. It
totally does.
A lot of
incentive-based gaming.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and something else that XP leveling has going for it when I'm on the player side of the table is I can't stand random encounters in a milestone leveling environment. In a story-first environment, I hate random encounters.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah,
because I want my encounters to mean something, to spill forward and not just be weird blips on the radar that don't mean anything. But my expectations go a different way with XP leveling. I don't mind them so much because it's just part and parcel of the whole thing. When you're going out on a map, especially a sandbox map, you're going to run into things that may or may not have anything to do with your story, but they have everything to do with your setting. and they anchor you in time and place.
That's what I
and
love.
that's the value that they have.
Yes, that's why I love random encounters.
But I hate it in milestone leveling because I want Ravenloft had this amazing advertisement that they did in the back of their books way back in the 90s. In Ravenloft, there are no random encounters, only deadly ones. Every encounter matters. Every encounter has relevance.
I love that.
And every encounter pushes the exigency forward. Pushes the
exigency.
The emergency of the situation.
That is the
threat, right? Nipping at your heels.
$20 word there, my guy.
But that's my contribution for the day.
Okay.
But I just can't stand random encounters in a story where I'm trying to piece together what's going on and why it's going on and who's at the center of this web of intrigue and happenings and shenanigans. 6 books worth of shenanigans. And I'm putting it's a 6-book puzzle we're putting together when we play these APs.
And to all our DMs out there who are running games, that doesn't mean you can't have random encounters in a milestone game. Yeah. What it does mean is every random encounter you run, you then have to go and find a reason for that to be important.
You got to reverse engineer your intent.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's totally fine. That's legit.
That's the
I don't want to shit on that.
I love doing
My
that.
brain falls apart as a player when I see a story that I'm being invited into and I go from act 1 to act 2 to act 3 and there's a whole bunch of shit in there that can go away and the story wouldn't change. And that drives me crazy.
This reminds me of when we were playing Extinction Curse, spoilers, and fucking dinosaurs came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And I was just like, wait, what the did I miss something?
Yeah.
Was I not taking notes? No. There's just dinosaurs,
demons, and circus clowns.
Oh my God. That adventure path.
I went back and
nuts.
reread that entire adventure path this past weekend.
Yeah.
And I can think of 1,000 ways I would have done it differently in hindsight.
Really?
But
it's 2020.
It's still, that AP still grinds my gears.
I love it. I love it. All right. I think we covered pretty much everything we could have covered on this topic.
Yeah.
For the most part, I think at this point we're just
sure. Let's go with that.
We're just
something I'm going to notice is I couldn't come up with a single con on milestone leveling as a GM. I couldn't find a single drawback.
Oh,
when I'm a GM and I do milestone leveling, it's a win-win proposition.
As a GM?
Yeah, when I'm the GM, yeah. So I don't know about all you guys out there. I won't speak for anybody else, but when I'm a GM and I do XP leveling, there's drawbacks.
Mm-hmm.
As a player, there's drawbacks. As a player with milestone, there's drawbacks.
Mm-hmm.
As a GM with milestone, I can't think of a single one. I mean, it's complete and total freedom, and I know what I want to do with it. And I know how to shape the experience I want.
Maybe that's its biggest pro is that there are no cons to the GM. It's the perfect system for running a game.
And some people completely freak out when there's no parameters and they don't know what to do with all that freedom. I'm not one of those guys, so it works for me specifically.
For me, creativity within constraint is my happy place.
Yeah. Optimization within constraints is your creativity. If I'm reading you right.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, that's a really good way to put it.
It's an expression of what brings you joy.
That's why I'm a Johnny.
Yeah. That's why you're a what?
A Johnny in Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, that's right.
The 3 psychographic profiles of Magic. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Magic players.
So yeah, at the end of the day, everybody needs to figure out whether they thrive under XP progression or milestone or some combination of the two. Which one's more than the other?
Yeah.
It's rarely one or the other. It's some combination of the two.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we implore you to try one or the other if you haven't yet.
Try them both. Try them at the same time. Change it from week to week.
How do you try it?
Just find...
That's impossible.
It's sure it is.
Can't go from
we'll do a small pot on that.
Okay, gotcha.
We'll figure it out. There's got to be a way.
I guess at a turning point of a level, the game could shift. Especially in Pathfinder. In Pathfinder 2nd Edition, it would be actually incredibly easy because the experience points resets to 0 at the beginning of every level. So you could very easily go from experience points to milestone and then back. But it would have to be at the turning of a level, probably. That would make the most sense.
What a schizophrenic experience that would be as a player for me.
Oh my God. At the beginning.
I would be role-playing my character differently from level to level.
Oh okay, hear me out. Hear me out. At the beginning of every session, where you just leveled, the everyone rolls a d20. And
I hate this already. Continue.
Everyone rolls a d20. And if the average roll of the dice is even, or better yet, if all the numbers add up to being an even, you do experience leveling for that. No. Experience leveling.
I hate everything about this
Experience
conversation.
leveling would have to be an odd number, and an even number would have to be milestone leveling. So it's literally fucking random, and everyone's hand went into deciding the randomness of what kind of gameplay experience you're going to have for the next level. And then you do it again and again and again, all 20 levels.
We have gone completely off the rails at this point.
But that would be like, that's
an April 1st session is what that is.
No, but like, I genuinely think there are, there's a saying, there are no new ideas in the world. I can't imagine anyone ever being dumb enough to actually do that. So this may be genuinely
somebody out there is starting right now.
An original idea that's been put out into the world. If you do this, please come to our Discord.
You kind of have to build a setting around that.
Tell us about it. Do you?
I think so. I mean, to have it make sense other than just a weirdo exercise.
Oh, it would work so
like
well.
A limbo kind of plane.
Or in a dark archive focus setting.
Sure. Yeah.
Where time foolery.
Time and dreams. You can do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. The rubber's starting to hit the road.
Dreams. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And even better, like the whether or not you're on experience or milestone dictates kind of where the story goes in one direction or the other. So like you could tie time shenanigans to experience leveling, and you could tie dream shenanigans to milestone leveling, or something like that, arbitrary connection. And as the randomness of the party decides, you have a more time shenanigans focused campaign or dream focused campaign, based on the weirdness of the die roll and how it turns out. And that would be really interesting experience.
Okay, two things. One, I love that idea. Yeah. Two, we should probably wind this down.
Okay, yeah.
This got really weird.
The fucking rails. What are rails? All right, I think that's it for today.
All right.
Thanks so much for hanging out with us, goblins. We really appreciate you. We've got a Discord. It's freaking awesome. We talk about crazy shit like that all the time. And then, if you want to discover the sausage, if you want to taste the sausage, you can join the Patreon. On the Patreon, you get access to a special channel on the Discord.
Patreon is pretty tasty.
It's the makiest of the sausage.
Are we R-rated yet?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, we'll clear that hurdle.
100%. So yeah, if you want to join the Patreon, you can find out how the sausage is made. We try to post as much as we can on the Discord, talking in the Discord, telling you what we're doing on a regular basis. And we also make patron-only videos. We hope to make patron-only content.
This is so much fun to do, too.
Yeah.
Different format and everything.
Exactly. Huge, totally different format. A lot more fast and loose on kind of like our preference on things and stuff like that. Very fun. We're working on a new video for this month's Patreon right now. It's going to be awesome. So yeah, come and check us out. I would love to see you there. But as always, most importantly,
keep it weird.
Keep it weird, goblins. We'll catch you.